Thanks very much, David. And I'd also just like to thank Michaela and Caroline for the opportunity to be here today and to hear the contributions from all the speakers. And I might refer back to those in our reflection piece at the end. But first, I just want to give you a very brief overview of where and how sustainable tourism is being addressed at policy level in Ireland. So just before we just talk about tourism policy itself, in terms of where sustainability policy sits, the Irish government has adopted the UN Sustainable Development Goals, which address the global challenges we face as part of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. And the government has published a Sustainable Development Goals National Implementation Plan, and my department plays an active role in implementing that plan. In addition, the recently approved Climate Action Bill establishes a legally binding framework with clear targets and commitments to ensure we achieve our climate goals. And again, every sector will have to play its part, and I suppose I'm confident that the tourism sector will be a strong participant in achieving those legally binding targets. But just in relation to sustainable tourism development, I suppose it's important to remember that it's not only an environmental issue, but that the economic and the social and the community aspects need to be addressed. And therefore, we incorporate the UN WTO definition of sustainable tourism in our policy framework. And Rob would have referred to this in his presentation. Tourism that takes full account of its current and future economic, social and environmental impacts, addressing the needs of visitors, the industry, the environment and the host communities. In short, I suppose the VICE model. So the outgoing National Tourism Policy, People, Place and Policy, it dates from 2015. And at that time, it affirmed that tourism was a key element of economic strategy, with development in the tourism sector reflecting the highest standards of environmental and economic sustainability. So we were trying to address the balance issues at that time as well. This policy has been successfully implemented by way of tourism action plans, initially 2016 to 2018 plan, and then laterally a 2019 to 2021 plan. However, the most recent action plan was interrupted by the need to respond to the COVID crisis. So in relation then to the COVID crisis, a tourism recovery task force was appointed in May 2020, and it prepared a tourism recovery plan. And that plan sets out recommendations of how the tourism sector can adapt and recover in a very changed tourism environment. So obviously the first, I suppose, focus has been on the survival recommendations for the sector. I mean, this was a sector decimated by the impact of the pandemic. But the plan is also looking at the longer term recommendations to build a sustainable and a resilient tourism sector for the future. And I know that resilience was brought up earlier, and I think it is important that we have a sector that can withstand future shocks. So in line then with the programme for government commitment, the development of a new national tourism policy will commence later this year by the department. And it will mainstream sustainability, and I think that is important, that sustainability isn't seen as an add-on to any policy. It has to be at the core of our tourism policy going forward. And this policy will be consistent with our sectoral climate change targets, our SDG commitments, and the National Economic Recovery Plan. So just maybe the next slide then, Clara. So in terms of the structures then, a Sustainable Tourism Working Group was established under the aegis of the Minister's Tourism Leadership Group. This was the group that oversaw policy implementation in the past. And the purpose of the group was to review international best practice in sustainable tourism and then propose guiding principles for sustainable development in Ireland. And as Orla mentioned earlier, this group comprised representatives from the department, the tourism agencies and the tourism industry. So it was a very collaborative approach with the necessary buy-in from the main stakeholders. And I think that was a very important structure to put in place at that time. So the group's report, which was published in December 2019, set out the ambition that Ireland will seek to be amongst the world leaders in sustainable tourism practices. And then it set out guiding principles for sustainable tourism development. And I'm just going to go through those 8 principles. That all of government will work together with industry towards achieving a sustainable tourism sector, and that sustainable tourism growth will be achieved in a manner that focuses on overall economic benefit ahead of the number of tourists, and that tourism will support economic growth in communities throughout the country and with a greater spread of demand across the year. In delivering high quality tourism experiences that exceed our visitors' expectations, we will do so in a manner that minimises any negative environmental or community impacts. As custodians of our natural landscape and our historic and cultural assets, we will protect them for the next generation. Responsible behaviour by our visitors will be encouraged to maximise the mutual benefit of tourism to Ireland's people and place. The tourism sector will support and promote efforts to move to more sustainable forms of transport to and around Ireland. And the tourism sector must play its part to help deliver Ireland's commitments under the Paris Agreement on climate change. And I think what is important about those principles now is that they were from 2019, and this was the direction of travel. And now in a post-COVID world, that these are still robust and that these are still the principles that we will follow as we develop our policy. So just the next slide then, please, Clara. So the advent of the COVID crisis meant that the work on the Sustainable Tourism Working Group, it was temporarily suspended because all of our focus had to go on that immediate survival of the sector. But the group was re-established earlier this year, and it is now working on the next steps, which is the interim action plan. And this is about identifying the steps that need to be taken to promote sustainable tourism practices that can be implemented now in the lead up to the new policy. And it's envisaged that the interim action plan will contain a number of policy commitments by the department, as well as actions on research methods and new data sources, which will fill the gaps in our current evidence base. It will also aim to form a clear narrative for communicating about the sustainability agenda and build a better understanding and awareness amongst tourism stakeholders and the general public about this agenda and its implementation. And then it'll address actions that need to be taken by industry itself under the guidance of Orla and her team, as well as actions then for the tourism agencies. And it's all about moving towards developing Ireland as an attractive and a competitive sustainable tourism destination. And Ireland, it has that reputation as the Emerald Isle internationally, and sustaining and nurturing this green image through the adoption of sustainable tourism practices, I suppose it's going to be an essential component of our recovery and certainly any future tourism growth. So just the last slide then, Clara. So it's really just the reflections on the day, and Caroline had asked me just to maybe to sum up with this. And I think today has been very useful for all tourism stakeholders, and it certainly provided us with an opportunity to explore how we can make better use of the trans-European knowledge in our sustainable tourism journey. I think the COVID crisis has essentially, it's pressed the reset button for tourism, and we have an opportunity now to learn, I suppose, from the past and to build on that research and the evidence from the case studies like those that we've heard about today. And I have to say, I found Bernd and Gemma's presentations really, really insightful on that destination carrying capacity project and green infrastructure. And I think that whole idea of the balance between developing an attractive tourism destination and protecting the environmental ecosystem, it is a challenge, and it is something certainly that we will be addressing as we develop the tourism policy. And I suppose maybe just on that, the green infrastructure and the multi-functionality, one very good example, I suppose, has been the policy at national level on the greenways. And the National Greenway Strategy, it recognises the benefits that can arise from the development of the greenways in Ireland, and that is as a tourism product, but also for local communities in terms of economic benefits, and then also as an amenity in terms of physical activity and contributor to health and well-being. So it really has that multifunctionality. But I have to say, David, I think all of the presentations today really highlighted the importance of collaboration. Collaboration and cooperation between the national and the local agencies, and together with all of the stakeholders as we reimagine the tourism sector in Ireland. Like, it's very evident that the ingredients, they're all there, the coordination structures are all there, and now it is a case of putting it all together as we move forward and really put Ireland forward as a world-class sustainable tourism destination. So look, there's certainly a lot of food for thought from the day, and we will be engaging with all of the stakeholders as we develop the new policy, and I'm really looking forward to hearing from people again. I just want to thank you, David, and Michaela and Caroline, for the opportunity for being here today. So thank you very much.